$1 million Bitcoin, Samson. When's that going to happen?
My guess is it's going to be this year.
It's going to be this year. That's a 10x.
Bitcoin has 17x in the past. There is no upper bound to Bitcoin. People talk about diminishing returns, right? But if it's a step change, just like the failure of the German mark, it's not a gradual thing and there's no upper bound. It's just gone.
Are they scared of Bitcoin, Samson?
I think the IMF is definitely scared of Bitcoin because they are a fiat organization. With Bitcoin, they're irrelevant, or they need to adopt Bitcoin. It's their choice. Either you adapt or you die.
My question to you is, why is the price still at $97,000 if we have all this massive purchasing going on? Is it like a flush? All right, we're here in the beautiful El Salvador in the Jan 3 headquarters in Casa Cielo with the legendary one and only Samson Mow. How you doing, man?
Thank you, Nico. It's great to be here.
Dude, great to be here as well. I kind of want to give a little bit of the backstory, how we got this working. So of course, Plan B Forum was just over the weekend here in El Salvador for the first time. And I was like, Samson, you know, do you want to come on the show? And you just replied with, do you want to do it in a volcano? And I just replied with, absolutely, period. And then we scrambled and we got this together with this beautiful shot. By the way, for anyone who's watching this, it's not a green screen, it's an actual volcano. So it's pretty cool.
Don't trust, verify. You can come here.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. So Samson, you know, we're here. The price of Bitcoin at the time of recording is currently $97,000. I think people were expecting a lot more of it, honestly. And I think that's something that you've said on recent interviews, that Bitcoin is massively undervalued. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been predicting 1 million for a while, and hopefully I'll hit sometime. But I believe this pullback is very normal because the altcoin market was overheated. If you look at XRP, Ripple, it was $3. That's ridiculous. With Bitcoin at 97 or so, Ripple is still at 260. And then you have Solana and everything. Everything is overpriced right now for the altcoins. So I think it's normal. We come down, they shake off, and then we go back up. Bitcoin dominance increases again. But Bitcoin dominance is really intellect measurement, like how much money is being allocated to altcoins. And that needs to drop before we can take off again, I believe. But overall, Bitcoin is undervalued. And I think even at 100K, 150, 200, it's still undervalued.
And what's the case for it being undervalued?
Well, there's just so much demand for Bitcoin right now from MicroStrategy, from the ETFs, from nation states, from ordinary people buying and hodling, that I don't think people have fully realized that most of the year's supply of mined Bitcoin is already gone a few times over. So you have to understand there is ultimate scarcity in Bitcoin. And I believe the understanding of ultimate scarcity is very far away still. People just can't wrap their heads around there only being 21 million. And when the price drops, people kind of feel confident that I can get it later. But then Bitcoin rips and then there is no later. Like imagine being able to buy Bitcoin at $10,000 a coin again. It's not possible. And this milestone of 100,000 will be gone again in time.
And you say that there's a lot of demand, right? There's the talk of the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which some news came out that Ripple tried to sabotage it in some way. It seems like we still have 180 days as a community to kind of fight back on that front. And of course, MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin, a lot of companies following in the footsteps of MicroStrategy, like MetaPlanet, like Semler Scientific, and they're all following the MicroStrategy strategy, and it seems like all their stocks are performing because of it. El Salvador continues to buy massive amounts of Bitcoin. My question to you is, why is the price still at $97,000 if we have all this massive purchasing going on? Is it like a flush?
So there's two things I would say. One is there are obviously OGs or old hodlers that are going to sell something and, you know, buy a house, maybe enjoy life a bit. So there will always be some coins that are sold outside of the mined supply. But there's also roughly 2 million coins that sit on exchange for market making, trading, and arbitrage. And those 2 million coins, it's dropping obviously. And it was at more than 2 million before, but now it's at, you know, around 2 million. But that is enough for the coins to drop the market. And a lot of it has to do with Bitcoin being a 24/7 market as well. So this drop, I believe, is related to the tariff war. You know, American, Canadian, Mexican, well, we're all going to tariff each other. And it's just panic. So Bitcoin being the only 24/7 liquid market is the only thing that can react immediately. So it's sort of like the market sentiment is taken out on Bitcoin. We're the first to move, the most volatile, and the biggest move. And then the equities markets and everything else follows after that when the markets open. Such an antiquated concept, right? But that's what it is. But going back to the point, those 2 million coins is enough to move the market a little bit. And the impact of those 2 million coins, I believe, is becoming less and less pronounced as we increase hodlers. So if you break down the scheme of who impacts Bitcoin price, you have the hodlers. Zero impact. They're just sitting on the coins. And in ways you can look at it, they're coiling up that spring. Then you have the buyers, the people that are DCAing either like by day or by month, or you can say MicroStrategy is also in the DCA category, and hodling, but they're actively in acquisition mode and Metaplanet. And like you said, then you have the traders, which is kind of that 2 million coins. So that is kind of what is driving the market. And Bitcoin will always be volatile because you have that slush fund of coins on exchanges. But that is going to be drained over time. And we do see that. And it makes it more pronounced, the coil up effect from the DCAers and the hodlers.
Absolutely. What do you think about Trump being elected?
I think Trump is the best choice of the current slate of candidates that we have right now, and probably the best option for America moving forward in this period of time, because he's able to bring together different groups. Like he brought Elon Musk. You know, you might think he's a shitcoiner and whatnot, but he is the richest man in the world and influential and capable. He's able to bring RFK group, the people that are concerned about health and other things, and some activism, environmentalism. So he's able to kind of bridge together different segments of the population that hasn't really been done before in recent times. So I think Trump coin, Melania coin aside, it was the best choice that America could have made. The other choice was Kamala and dark times, more Elizabeth Warren, choke point 3.0, everything bad possibly for Bitcoin and, you know, the crypto industry. But now we see the tariffs, and that's another interesting can of worms. But at least you can see that the tariffs are going to be great for Bitcoin. I think near term, people that are affected by the tariffs, they probably can't see it. Or if they're not into Bitcoin, they may not be thinking about this. But it's going to drive a lot of people to look at Bitcoin and protect themselves.
Okay. And the thing that interested me also is you said Operation Choke Point 3.0. And we just went through Operation Choke Point 2.0. And a lot of the things that they were doing, they were trying to obfuscate it. They weren't being transparent about it. Do you believe that it was a malicious attack on Bitcoin and the Bitcoin industry to at least slow down the adoption of it in the United States?
Definitely. It was a kind of covert operation to throttle Bitcoin and crypto adoption. And it's really just to protect the existing system, right? Protect the Fed, protect the dollar in a certain way, protect the banking system in a certain way, and all the incumbents, right? And you see that with, closure of some of the banks for absolutely no reason. I think Signature, right? It was just closed for no reason whatsoever. And if you guys had elected Kamala, you would have, 3.0, another version of Choke Point. And without the new checks and balances that Department of Government Efficiency is trying to introduce.
It sucks that he named it after Doge.
Yeah, take the good with the bad.
It was a massive troll. What do you think about Ross being freed?
I think that's the most important thing. So I had a wish list for Trump. I had some predictions and a wish list. I think if he just frees Ross and stops attacking Bitcoin, like stops the attack on Bitcoin hodling, I think that's enough. A strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's good for the government. It doesn't really do much for the people, except for a mass education program for the people. Like, okay, the government has it, now I should have it. But outside of that, it doesn't really do anything for your average person in the US directly.
So one of the arguments is that it would be used to pay down the debt. It'd be used to, get the country out of debt, have this reserve for the country, and it'd be beneficial. Like, at least that's how it's being pitched. You're saying that that would be beneficial for the US government, but that wouldn't necessarily be beneficial for U.S. individuals.
Paying off the debt would be beneficial for U.S. individuals, but
if they used it for that.
Yes, if they used it, but you don't know what they will use.
That's
it for.
a big if.
And you don't know what the composition will be yet either of because it's not a strategic Bitcoin reserve now. It's a digital asset reserve, which is broad and diverse and inclusive, but we don't know yet what's going to be in there. And hopefully it'll be just Bitcoin, but there are obviously altcoin projects lobbying to be included, like Ripple.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting about El Salvador is how much it's been focused solely on Bitcoin. It's like it's resisted that. How come?
I think President Bukele is a Bitcoiner, Trump is not a Bitcoiner. He spoke at, what was it, Nashville conference, but he's not a Bitcoiner. He's done a lot of other crypto-related projects, and I don't think he fully understands Bitcoin, and you can kind of pick that level of understanding out from his speech. If you compare his speech to RFK's speech, it's a world of difference. So he's more crypto, right? And that's probably why the US is not as Bitcoin maximalist as El Salvador is. So we'll see how things go over time. But there are a lot of lobbying groups in the US, obviously, too, exchanges that are trying to push them towards, crypto. And if it diversifies the reserve, that's probably why.
So recently, the IMF and El Salvador reached an agreement so that El Salvador would receive a loan. And I think a lot of people are seeking clarity in terms of, is Bitcoin still legal tender in the country?
Yeah, so it's confusing. And I would say the breakdown is this. It's a glass of water. It's kind of at the halfway mark. You can look at it as half full or half empty. So the Bitcoin law has been softened, or you can say neutered a bit. They've amended it to comply with the IMF agreement, almost to the letter. So everything they said in the IMF agreement, they've amended it. But I think the key thing is the amendments leave the door kind of open. It's ambiguous. So there is still a Bitcoin law, but Bitcoin is no longer a currency, and it is legal tender, but it is now voluntary. So what does that mean exactly? It means Bitcoin is legal tender. There's no capital gains tax still.
Okay.
There's another line in there that says you can use Bitcoin. The government can't now. So there is this Bitcoin law. Bitcoin is legal tender, but what is a legal tender without enforcement? Not that there was before. It always has been voluntary. So you can look at it both ways. Like, some people are reacting very strongly and saying, they capitulated, they bent the knee to the IMF, and, because they sold us out, and they're very disillusioned. And then you have the promoters of El Salvador and Bukele, and they're saying, yeah, we won. We're going to take the money and buy Bitcoin with IMF money. But I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. There was a compromise. There was adaptation. The law itself is weakened, but Bitcoin still has a standing here in El Salvador. So you take the good with the bad. And I think it makes sense in the long run. Bukele is not the president of Bitcoin. He's the president of El Salvador. I mean, he has to do what he thinks is the right thing for this country. And if he thinks the right thing for the country is to secure the IMF loan, which will lead to other loans, then that's the way they should go.
There's a couple things that are quite interesting to me. So it's still legal tender, but it's voluntary. And El Salvador is still continually buying it almost on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sounds like a pretty good compromise. And then if you're coming at it from a Bitcoiner's perspective, you would want Bitcoin to be adopted from the bottom up. You wouldn't want a top down type of thing. And what really sticks out to me, and I remember I asked Mrs. Mayorga, the ambassador to the United States from El Salvador, and I asked her the same thing about capital gains. And I think that's the part that sticks out.
Yeah.
Because as long as there's no tax implications from you using Bitcoin as money, then what does it matter if it doesn't have, what does it matter if it has the official stamp of legal tender if people are just still using it to transact?
Yeah, so there are things that we can do. So Jan 3, we work on nation state Bitcoin adoption. There are interesting paths for us to use Bitcoin as legal tender as a currency. We can go to other countries that have laws recognizing foreign currencies like Guatemala, and we can say, Mr. President, just accept it. It's a foreign currency. There's precedent already for recognizing and using foreign currencies in different countries. So that's an angle that is interesting for Bitcoin and for Jan 3 to push. But we can live without that. Or we can get another country to make it a currency and follow that angle again. But I think the top-down is beneficial still, because launching Chivo, making these announcements, promoting Bitcoin and Bitcoin education initiatives, that is top-down, but is sort of an endorsement and a blessing. And a lot of people, they look towards the government, obviously not us, but they look towards the government for approval before they do something. And it is something. It is worth something.
And before I ask you about Jan 3, do you believe that this was a setback for nation state adoption?
It's to be seen.
Okay.
It's to be seen. It's not really a setback for nation state adoption. I believe nation state adoption has already taken off. So once El Salvador made the move, we started going forth. I started Jan 3. I brought on a lot of amazing people to the team, and we put together this network of people going out and engaging. We've met with the president of Madeira. He said, I'm going to make Madeira, a place for Bitcoin. We met with presidents in many countries around the world. We've met with regulators, politicians, and even central banks. And the tide, I believe, has turned. We now have some central banks reaching out to us. Someone passed them our email, and we got an email a few months back saying, we would like to discuss hyper-Bitcoinization.
No way.
Yes. And then the emails are, from the central bank. We said, yeah, we're happy to talk. We know who introduced us, but then they sent a meeting invite, and the meeting invite was hyper-Bitcoinization.
Was it like a Google Meet?
Yes.
So it was just on the calendar, Google Calendar, hyper-Bitcoinization, and you're meeting with the central bank.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're definitely heading in the right direction. Before I ask you about the IMF and what their motivation would be to do something like this with El Salvador, or to ask El Salvador to compromise, what is Jan 3?
Jan 3 is a company. We do a lot of things. Our mission is to accelerate Bitcoin adoption, or hyper-Bitcoinization. And basically anything that falls into this mission, we will pursue. So one of the first things we did was launch the Aqua Wallet, a non-custodial Bitcoin and Layer 2 and stablecoin wallet, because we see an opportunity to onboard the 400 million or so Tether USDT users into Bitcoin. They're already using Tether. And the sad thing is they're using Tether in altcoin wallets. So they're getting pushed, NFTs and staking and DeFi and gambling. And there is no Bitcoin wallet that's out there in a meaningful way showcasing Bitcoin, Layer 2, and Tether. Just a really simple offering. And that was our mission, to kind of onboard those people into Bitcoin and give a Bitcoin wallet that has a lot of utility. So that's one of the aspects of the business. We have Jan 3 Financial. We offer some financial products and services. One of them is an OTC. So we've been running that for about a year now. And the goal is that we have a track record. And when the next country says, I want to buy $10 billion of Bitcoin, we can say, well, we'll help you with that. And then we have the nation state push, which is just a lot of us in our free time, which is not that much, plus a network of volunteers around the world that try to get us meetings with presidents and finance ministers, ministers of economy, all of these to push for Bitcoin adoption around the world at the top-down level. So we kind of do both. We work on top-down and grassroots.
I love that. So just focused on hyper-Bitcoinization. I want to ask you about the Aqua Wallet, because I think a lot of Bitcoiners expected that in the developing world, you're going to see massive adoption of Bitcoin as people sought non-sovereign alternatives because their local fiat currencies were so terrible. But I think what we saw instead, what the market is telling us, is we're seeing this massive adoption of stablecoins,
yeah,
specifically stablecoin Tether, like the dollar stablecoin.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting. I think a lot of Bitcoiners didn't expect that, but being from Latin America myself originally, I think for a lot of people, it's hard to understand that they're just trying to get by.
Yeah.
Right. They don't have the luxury of being able to save.
Yeah.
So just having a currency that is stable, that they can earn in, is a massive upgrade to, where they could have been before.
Yeah. I think it comes down to Alex Gladstein's book title, check your financial privilege. A lot of people, a lot of Bitcoiners, especially really hardcore maximalists, are like Bitcoin and nothing else. But you have the luxury as a Bitcoiner in the West to buy Bitcoin. A lot of people are just trying to earn a living and get by. They may not have a bank account. They can't get a bank account because they don't have an address. And they're excluded. The financial system is a two-tier system. People can get in and people cannot get in. That's it. And it's engineered that way. And it will always be that way. The only thing that can break that system is Bitcoin. So the reason why people are seeking Tether and stablecoins is because they need access to that system. They don't yet understand Bitcoin, but they do want the dollar to hedge, right? So if you're a merchant and you're selling stuff and your suppliers want dollars or, you know, Argentinian pesos, and you have Bitcoin, you know, there is volatility in Bitcoin both ways. And we can't ignore the fact that, you know, some guy taking Bitcoin can lose a significant amount of money just by taking Bitcoin and not hedging, because that's not their savings. It's not yet really savings as long as there is volatility. It's savings for people that can weather volatility. People that can't, they need a stable unit. And, you know, Bitcoiners like to say, well, stable coins are not stable because the fiat money is devaluing, but compared to the Argentinian peso, the dollar is gold, right? Or compared to the bolivar, it's gold. And I think we just have to ignore people that criticize that and focus on onboarding these 400 million people to liquid tether and Bitcoin.
Well, it's a stepping stone.
It is.
And then there's another part. It's an interesting phenomenon too, because like as Bitcoiners, shouldn't we be free market maxis, right? And the market is telling us, right, that the developing world, massively in Latin America, they're really interested in getting a dollar rather than, you know, Bitcoin. I think it's an educational thing. I think it's a survival thing.
Yes.
I think it's like the principle, like the hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
right? Like you just need to be able to survive, and then you start thinking. And I think it's a Trojan horse because it gives people essentially the ability to custody dollars in their mind on a digital wallet without having to go through a bank account. And then eventually they're going to come to the conclusion that all of us have had in the West, which is like, the dollar is a scam too.
Yeah.
And all roads lead to Bitcoin. Now, you said that Jan 3 focuses on hyper-Bitcoinization. What is that?
Hyper-Bitcoinization is the point at which we no longer convert Bitcoin into fiat. There's only Bitcoin left. So it's the end state, really. And you could say it's hyperinflation of the dollar, really, right? When a dollar hyperinflates, then no one's going to want the dollar. They will just want Bitcoin. So yeah, it's the greatest demonetization event in human history. Basically, all fiat will die all at the same time, very rapidly, and everyone just wants Bitcoin and transacts in Bitcoin.
Really? It's just, so you don't see a world where the dollar and Bitcoin can coexist?
I don't see it, but a lot of Bitcoiners do see it. I think Saylor is one of those. Like, if you look at his Bitcoin 24 model, right? He actually tapers off the model after a number of years to kind of slow the death of Bitcoin, slow the death of fiat. So Bitcoin growth tapers off. But I think monetary systems, especially when you're dealing with 100x improvement over the old system and even over gold, it's not a gradual taper. It's just a flip of the switch. Everyone's just going to switch to this new thing. I don't see that happening in Bitcoin, and we didn't even see that happen with the devaluation of the German mark. It wasn't that it slowly tapered off, and there was one baker in this village over there that was still taking the mark, 5 years later, because that network effect of that money dies. So maybe some people have it in a drawer, but no one's actually going to exchange anything for the mark.
And I mean, that's going to be a pretty big impact on the world, right?
That's why we're working on getting Bitcoin adoption out there as fast as we can to soften the fall.
Okay.
It's like the Foundation series, right?
Yeah.
You can't stop the fall, although we can soften the fall.
And it's going to radically change the world. And before I get to that, like, what are the implications of essentially fiat ending? Because it's going to be essentially a change in the balance of power between the state and the individual. And I think there's very, very deep implications there. But what do you think were the motivations behind the IMF asking for those concessions from El Salvador? Are they scared of Bitcoin, Samson?
I think the IMF is definitely scared of Bitcoin because they are a fiat organization. For those people that don't know, they have their own shitcoin. It's called the
SDR.
Yeah, SDR, Strategic Drawing Rights, which means they can just kind of print their own money out of thin air too. But with Bitcoin, they're irrelevant, or they need to adopt Bitcoin. It's their choice. Either you adapt or you die. But I think there's another darker angle here, which is they're basically a loan shark. Their job is to lend money in perpetuity to countries like El Salvador and developing places around the world. And this kind of puts them out of a job. So I think they had to fight for that. or they wanted to save face, because remember, they made a big stink about all the Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador, that, you know, you're going to fail, it's dangerous and whatnot. And when they're wrong and they're incorrect, and the metrics prove them incorrect, vastly incorrect, I think they need something to save face. So maybe they insisted on these concessions just so they can say, yes, we got something.
Yeah, it definitely felt that way. It definitely felt that way, because it was like, haha, we won. But if you, it's what you said with the analogy of the glass, right? It really depends on how you look at it. But the most important aspects, there's no capital gains implications.
Yeah.
You could still use it as money. They're still buying it as reserve. So did they really win? Right? It's like an optics. It was for the optics more than the substance.
Yeah.
From my perspective.
And as you said, it doesn't really matter, because that's kind of government top-down adoption is icing on the cake. The real important part is the grassroots adoption. And I think that still needs work too. We should not be lying to ourselves and say, yeah, it's perfect already. We've got, you know, educational initiatives and we're good here. There's still a lot of people here in El Salvador that have no idea. And we still have a lot of work to do.
Guys, I want to tell you about our sponsor, BitcoinWell.com. It's the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. What makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, which means as soon as you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well and the funds clear, they go straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. Enable your independence today with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada and the United States. Head over to BitcoinWell.com to get started.
So I want to talk about the end of fiat, and because this is a fascinating subject. You know, I think every Bitcoiner has read the book The Sovereign Individual by now, at least a couple times. And the book essentially makes the case that information technologies were essentially going to take away the importance away from nation states and from governments. And one of the biggest funding mechanisms of government, of the state, is their ability to print money out of thin air. Once that ability goes away, what is the role of government in society?
Hopefully it's reduced massively. The whole way that government works right now is very flawed. And I think about this a lot because I work on a game set in the future. So I'm trying to think, how does government work in the future? And there are differing schools of thought. You know, some Bitcoiners think anarchy, and, you know, it's just free for all. I think you still need some structure in place, because there will be bad people that do bad things, and you need to be able to deal with that somehow. And I think there will still be a need for relationships with other groups, like diplomacy. So I think there is some role for government, very scaled back, very administrative, not prescriptive in many ways, and based off of some sort of foundational codex of laws that's far simplified, and mirroring a bit of Bitcoin. So consensus-based rules, where to do something, you need a supermajority to consent to it. So there is no war, no emergency act, you know, no martial law able to be done without active consent of people. So that's probably somewhere we go, but definitely Bitcoin will change that relationship, because they can't print money, they can't take your money, so they just shrink naturally. And I think this is a good thing, because most of the problems we have today is the government is trying to do everything. It starts out slowly, but as you give people free stuff, they want more free stuff. And it just spirals out of control, where you have some of those things uncovered by the Department of Government Efficiency, which is the Treasury was just paying bills indiscriminately to terrorists too. So it just becomes a big machine that lives off of its own bureaucracy.
100%. And it's self-funded. It has a self-funding mechanism. And unlike private business, there's no feedback. Like if, you know, you run Gen 3 a certain way, or if I run Simply Bitcoin a certain way, we will go out of business. There's no feedback whatsoever with government. And what you're saying, what Doge has been uncovering has been ridiculous. And then you're just like, what do you mean you sent $50 million to that? Like, what is this? And they don't care. But yeah, there's no feedback mechanism incentivizing them to care.
The feedback mechanism is elections. So you get feedback every 4 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, people have very short attention spans and memories. So, you know, they forget, and then you re-elect them again. That's why Trudeau was elected twice.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad, but Bitcoin gives me hope that it will break this system. So Bitcoin fixes this.
It fixes this. It's a popularity contest to see who controls the money printer.
Yeah.
So what have been some of the difficulties that you have run into running Gen 3, rolling out the Aqua wallet, really pushing forward, Bitcoin adoption worldwide? What are some of the things that have happened since you launched Gen 3 that you would have never expected to run into?
So let's see. The Aqua side, the biggest challenge for us is we're trying to build it non-custodially, because I don't think you can make a custodial wallet that can scale to planet scale, and most importantly, onboard the billions of people that cannot access the financial system. So it has to be non-custodial. If you're trying to get licenses everywhere, until there's a massive sea change and everything is deregulated, it's just too slow, costly, and burdensome to do that. So if you want to build it non-custodially, you have a new set of challenges, which is delivering a Venmo-like experience without having custody. And that's actually very hard to do, and it slowed us down. But I think we're almost there. So we do a lot of interesting cryptography and tricks in there to make the swap system and everything seamless. So it's like PayPal or Venmo. It just works, but it's all non-custodial. So if a transaction, a swap fails, it just auto refunds back to your wallet. And that took us a lot of time to get right. We're trying to implement things like a Lightning address, but non-custodially too. So there's a lot of thinking that we have to put into how we do these things. But that was the biggest challenge for us. And also we got a massive influx of users, which we didn't expect. And that kind of made it more challenging we had to bring on more support people, and it slowed down dev as well. On the nation state side, I would say the challenge was we had the FTX fraud and blow up. That slowed us down a bit. There was a number of countries we had meetings planned with, and because of that, Bitcoin seemed to be the pariah again, and they didn't want anything to do with us or Gen 3 or Bitcoin, even though it's FTX and it's because they use FTT as collateral. But now that we're back, it's much easier, and especially with the talk of the strategic reserve in the US, that changes things a lot. So the ETFs changed the conversation. That made it easier. The Trump admin coming into power and formulating this path to a reserve has made it easier yet again for us. So tailwinds now.
That's good. I mean, it's very interesting to hear about the difficulties that you're running into with Aqua. I'm glad to hear that it's non-custodial. How did you pull that off? Because I feel like non-custodial Lightning at the moment is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, so we actually use a trick. We're using Liquid as the base layer.
Okay.
And we're using bolts to do swaps to Lightning. So
oh, interesting.
It's not really a Lightning wallet. And a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners were saying, that's not a Lightning wallet. We never said it was a Lightning wallet.
But does it matter if it does the same thing?
Well, to some people it matters. So your choice is right now a custodial wallet where maybe you KYC'd, maybe you didn't. But if you didn't KYC, then you actually have limits. And you have risk of, losing your funds somehow. If it's a non-custodial wallet, like Phoenix or whatever, you actually have to do a lot more. And there are costs, like opening up a channel, rebalancing, those are all touching the main chain, right? So people think it's cheap. They say, well, I'm using Phoenix and I can pay 1 sat, but you actually paid, $4 or $8 when it was expensive to open the channel at that time. But if you have Liquid as this stable middle layer, and Liquid's been around for 8-9 years now, very reliable, rock solid. Blockstream, we launched that when I was there. It's a touch point. So it's like a mid step. So you don't have to go back to the main chain and you can go back up to Lightning. It's a stable repository for your Bitcoin, which also has confidential transactions, by the way. So it gives you even better privacy. I believe the Phoenix guys said, right now, because we're the LSP and whatever, using Phoenix doesn't give you better privacy than using Wallet Satoshi or anything else. They can see everything. But with Aqua, you have Liquid with confidential transactions, and we do swaps with bolts. So it's probably the most private way to use Lightning right now, other than running everything yourself.
Why do you guys decide to use Liquid?
I think Liquid is a great technology, and it was always needed because it's a way to scale Bitcoin with side chains. So Liquid is anchored to Bitcoin. There can only be potentially 21 million coins in Liquid because you have to peg them into the Liquid network. But it gives you that confidentiality of confidential transactions, and you can unblind transactions if you need to unblind it. But this is actually a very important thing, not just for Lightning privacy, but for stablecoin privacy too. So my friend Russell was telling me, it's actually dangerous to use stablecoins in Latin America, the current ones like Tron and on Ethereum and Tron, because those are account-based systems. Liquid is UTXO based. It's a fork of Bitcoin, so it's 99% the same code, battle tested as Bitcoin. But with the confidentiality, when I send you Tether on Liquid, you can't see how much Tether I have. Whereas if you're using Tron, you send me that, let's say my cousin's a gangster. He'll say like, yeah, who's that guy? And how much Tether does he have? And then he goes and robs you or tells someone else to go rob you. And that's a real danger, I think, that has not really been fully crystallized in people's understanding yet. But I think they will understand. But above that, Liquid transactions are super cheap now. They're about 3 cents. There was a big upgrade to the network as part of Project Tsunami to make everything faster and cheaper. And now Bitcoin is probably Liquid is probably the cheapest way to transact stablecoins in LATAM in the most reliable fashion.
Interesting. And I didn't know that. Very, very interesting. So what do you think happens to the price of Bitcoin if the strategic Bitcoin reserve thing does go through in the United States? It looks like it's going to happen on the state level before the federal level.
Well, as Adam Back says, that's the path to 1 million.
$1 million Bitcoin, Samson. When's that going to happen?
My guess is it's going to be this year.
It's going to be this year.
You look at all the factors that we're facing. You have
That's a 10x.
Bitcoin has 17x in the past. There is no upper bound to Bitcoin. So there are people talk about diminishing returns, right? But if it's a step change, just like the failure of the German mark, it's not a gradual thing and there's no upper bound. It's just gone. And you use a new thing now, right? It's like, yeah, we don't use horses for transportation anymore. We came here on a car or on airplanes and whatnot. So we use the new thing. And Bitcoin is that new thing because it's 100, if not 1,000 times better than anything else we've used as money in human history. But back to the point, what do we have? We have MicroStrategy buying nonstop. We have ETFs, which are a doorway to legacy fiat money. If you go back to all the previous bull runs, where we get bogged down is the exchanges, because that's the touch point, right? That's how you convert fiat into Bitcoin. And if you remember back in the old bull runs, it was like Kraken's backlog for KYCing people was 3 months long. Coinbase, same thing. That's the bottleneck, because to comply as an exchange, you have to KYC everyone, and you don't keep 1,000-person KYC team, right? You have to keep a team that you can feed, and you can't scale it up that quickly. So that's kind of where it tapers off. But with the ETFs, there is no bottleneck anymore. Central banks can buy ETFs. So any demand for Bitcoin can now be satiated without any problem whatsoever. And that is really big. That's why actually I thought 2024 was going to be the year we hit 1 million, because I don't think people fully understand how big that is. Central banks can buy ETFs. There is no barrier for fiat money entering Bitcoin. But I think this year we'll hit it, since we missed last year. But you have MicroStrategy, you have ETFs, you have the removal of the barrier, you have nation states, and what else? There's just so much going on, like real adoption of Bitcoin. So I just can't see it not hitting 1 million this year. And the other thing is, you see a lot of people predicting prices, right? They like to be cautious and realistic and say, yeah, it can get to 150. It can get to 200. It can get to 250. Because I think they want to sound reasonable. Nobody wants to be the crazy guy saying it's going to 10x, like me. They want to be, I'm a serious person with realistic projections. But Bitcoin is not a realistic thing. It's a zero-sum game. Either you're going to use Bitcoin or you're going to starve. So it's all or none. And when you get to different levels, like when you get to 100K, when you get to 100K, it's different, right? When you get to 200K, the world again looks very, very different. Just close your eyes and imagine, what does the world look like when Bitcoin is at 500K? That's you're reaching half of gold's market cap at that point, you know? That will demonetize gold if it doesn't get demonetized earlier, because there's talk of, you know, the US selling gold to buy Bitcoin to fund their reserves, because that would take out their enemies who have been accumulating gold for the last decade, right? But disregard that. Bitcoin is sitting at 500K. We are the second largest asset now behind gold. It's a very different landscape. And at that point, do you think most people would still want to sell their Bitcoin to get fiat? Or would most people now insist on being paid in Bitcoin? I think it's the latter. So from there, you just 2x.
Yeah.
And then you're number one.
And you know, it's interesting because I come from the bullish school of thought too, but my thought process is a little bit different. This cycle reminds me of 2017. And 2017, we went from $1,000 in January to the end of 2017, we went to 20K.
Yeah.
No one had any idea
it
was going to happen in January. In fact, in January, the price stayed at $1,000.
Yeah.
2021 happened, and I believe 2021 was artificially cut short because of the China mining ban, because of FTX, because of Celsius.
Yeah.
And I think people have forgotten what a true Bitcoin bull market feels like.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the same type of kind of consensus understanding, which is 150K, 200K Bitcoin. You and I both know that when everybody on X or Twitter is calling for the same price predictions, Bitcoin does the exact effing opposite. So either we're going to underperform, which I doubt, or we're going to overperform, which no one is expecting more than 200,000, more than 300,000.
Yeah.
That's my thought process at kind of getting to, I don't know if it's 1 million, but 500,000, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we hit it this year.
I think it's this, I don't know what to call it. It's like a precipice effect, you know? Like you're standing on the edge of the cliff. People are scared because, yeah, we can fall a lot from 100K. And that's why you kind of like hover at that area for a while, because it's scary looking down. Like, what if we go to 70? And you remember when we had a little dip, everyone was saying, oh, we're going back to 70.
Yeah.
But when things solidify, then you kind of go up. And everyone that was panicking and looking down, looking off that precipice, they've been left behind already. And because the supply is so limited right now and the demand is so high, it's just going to shoot up. And you're going to see that kind of 2017 face melting shock and awe rise in Bitcoin price.
Absolutely. And I think the reason that it's because no one's seeing it. Everyone has, again, this general consensus of the price. No one's really expecting it. And Bitcoin tends to do the things that everyone least expects, especially if this strategic Bitcoin reserve thing comes to fruition. Like, I think it's going to happen, you know, the price is just going to 2x or 3x overnight.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially a rubber stamp of approval by the most powerful government on the face of the planet. Now, my question to you is, what happens when central banks that have the ability to essentially create money out of nothing start using that ability to buy something that has absolute scarcity like Bitcoin?
Omega candles.
LA is coming out of a volcano.
Perhaps.
So, yeah, but what happens? What breaks?
I think they can go for a while and print, because the world seems to takes time to adjust. If you look back at the lockdowns and the pandemic or plandemic, when they shut everything down, the prices didn't jump. It took 2 to 3 years, right, for kind of the normal person to understand, or even anybody in the supply chain to understand what's fully happened. And then you saw the inflation come. So all the money printing, the shutdown of economies, it didn't really kick in until 2 years later almost, right? And I think it's the same. Everything, it takes time for the world to adjust to. they haven't really fully adjusted or understood the impact of the ETFs and central banks being able to gain exposure to the ETFs. We also forgot to talk about the Czech Republic Bank, central bank. They've approved buying now too. So what you're talking about, Nico, is it's like on the cusp. But yeah, they can probably print and buy for some time because the ordinary man in the street is not going to fully understand what's going on. The pot is boiling too slowly for them to realize. If they would have understood the impact, they would have probably bought Bitcoin already just from trying to hedge against inflation alone.
Yeah. Do you think cycles are dead?
I don't really believe in cycles. I think if you flip a coin 4 times and then you flip it 4 times and you get the same pattern, it's a coincidence because each flip is independent. And there are a lot of arguments of why we have cycles, such as it's tied to the halving or it's tied to elections. But again, I believe in phase transitions, step changes. You just go to Bitcoin. And when you go to Bitcoin, there's no cycle. And this is why the power law guys hate me, because they expect it's going to progress in a meaningful way. Whereas my prediction with omega candles and everything is it.
What is an omega
changes.
candle?
An omega candle is 100,000
$100,000 candle
on a day.
And you think that's going to happen sooner rather than later?
It's already happening in other trading pairs.
Oh, that's right.
Egyptian pound, Turkish lira to Bitcoin, they already have omega candles.
Okay. This is very fitting, talking about omega candles in front of an omega volcano.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that you don't believe in diminishing returns.
I don't believe in diminishing returns.
Okay.
What's the diminishing returns on air travel from boat travel? We just have air travel. You take boats for leisure now.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't use it for transportation. So you've said in interviews in the past that the US dollar is going to rebase or debase. Rebase. I've never heard that term. What does that mean? The US dollar is going to rebase to Bitcoin.
It's sort of part of that transition to a new money. It's an attempt to shore up and strengthen a currency. So you can either do that with gold or anything, but you can also do that with Bitcoin. So you can kind of say, we're going to peg the dollar to Bitcoin now, and the debt is convertible, redeemable from Bitcoin. So 1 sat per dollar.
1 sat per, is that $10 million Bitcoin?
100 million.
Oh my God. Is the network ready for that? Is the network ready for a 10x? Like the amount of people that are going to come on board, is the main chain able to handle that?
I think so. I think people have kind of overlooked side chains because they're looking for more shiny, interesting things, more complex things that sound cool. But side chains are relatively simple, very reliable, and are proven to be a way that we can scale Bitcoin with just what we have now. Zero change to consensus rules. No need to ask devs for permission or to have a civil war or do anything. You just spin up your sidechain. And we have Liquid, which has been running for, getting close to a decade now. And Liquid is not decentralized. It's run by a federation. We can make the blocks bigger. We can ramp it up. We can scale it up, make it more robust. You can have other Liquid federations. And that is a way that right now, today, we can scale Bitcoin to meet the needs. So, Aqua uses Liquid now, but let's say Liquid is packed and full. Maybe there's another Liquid. Maybe El Salvador has a side chain. Maybe the Czech Republic has a side chain. We can support all of these, and we can perform atomic swaps between different side chains. So I don't see any issue with scaling Bitcoin. The question is how you want to scale it, because if you're going for orthodoxy, then you're a big blocker and you say, we need gigamegs, we need terabyte-sized blocks. Good luck. But if you're going to be pragmatic, use the technology that we have now and meet the demand, we can do all of that already.
So it's Bitcoin is able to scale, but it has to scale on layer 2.
Yes.
Gotcha. And the technology needs to be built out. I think you're solving that with the Aqua and the fancy tech in the side. And again, as a user, you don't really care what's happening in the background. Like the vast majority of people don't really care. Vast majority of people really care is, does it work?
Yeah. So, I mean, stablecoins, again, are another interesting example. A lot of people down there don't care. They're using Binance, right, to transact stablecoins. Send it to my Binance account. They're using Ethereum, Tron. They're not Ethereum maxis or Tron fans. They just want the dollar to save some money,
Yeah.
right? And they will move. They're moving from Ethereum. They moved from Ethereum to Tron because Ethereum stablecoin transactions were at $8 or something like that, right? Tron was a sub dollar, but still around that. And now Tron is at $2, and now they're moving to other things too. So there's no loyalty. These are just transport rails to people. They just care about being able to move money.
Yeah, and that's the vast majority of people. And I think Bitcoiners forget that on X, is that, the vast majority of people are really looking at the utility aspect of it.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone that feels they're late to Bitcoin now that it's at $100,000?
That's a good question. Like, I like to say we're early, but
Still?
yeah, I think we're still early. I
Okay.
mean, until we see Bitcoin,
Does it have 100X in it?
yeah. Well, I mean, how much more to go to dollar set parity,
Yeah.
right? But here's the thought exercise. Next time you're stopped at an intersection, at a red light, watch the people crossing on the crosswalk and ask yourself how many of them know about Bitcoin. Probably not many of them, right? And you can test this, like go to a restaurant and say, can I pay in Bitcoin? Watch them laugh at you. And then you can understand exactly how early you are.
Yeah. Where are we on the S curve?
Still
Early adopter?
Still early adopter.
Early adopter. Gotcha. What advice would you give to your younger self if you knew, you got into Bitcoin where Bitcoin was not as certain? I got into Bitcoin class of 2016. I remember the block wars. It was not fun.
Yeah.
Now we know that Jihan and that, we want to be specific with the names, but let's just say that they were artificially making the hash rate go higher.
Yeah.
And they were doing some interesting things with exchanges to do the volume, and there was a lot of uncertainty at that point. You questioned yourself as a Bitcoiner. Said, is this Bitcoin Cash thing, like, are they right? Like, now we know after the fact.
Well, I knew. You knew.
Now we know after the fact. Yeah, but it's because I got into Bitcoin through mining. But I would say if you're looking at that, if you're an observer, you don't know, right? You're looking at that, you're like, oh my God, like, is this a switch? So what I'm trying to say is you got in way earlier, right? Things were a lot more uncertain back then. Did you always know? What advice would you give to your younger self? Is it just going to be like, I wish I bought more?
Yeah, of course. That's the wish everyone has.
Okay, let's scratch that one out. What other advice would you give your younger self?
For Bitcoin specifically?
Bitcoin, entrepreneurship, whatever.
I think just focus and think about things. That's the advice I would give.
And could you elaborate a little bit about why you would give yourself that advice?
Because I think most people don't think deeply about topics. And if you really analyze a lot of things, I think you can reason out through first principles thinking, what is the right answer? Like, who's right in the block size war? You have to really step back and objectively look at the motivations and incentives of everyone. So I think that's the biggest thing to think. Like, if I was really young and I had to tell myself something, just think more about everything, analyze everything.
What motivated you to start Jan 3?
I want to accelerate Bitcoin adoption. So if Bitcoin adoption, if hyper-Bitcoinization is this demonetization event, there's a lot of preparation that has to go into onboarding humanity to Bitcoin. And the wallet obviously is a major touch point, right? Most people they're not going to get a node. They're just going to download a wallet and in an app store. So you need to have that solid and ready to onboard people. But engaging with governments, getting them ready so that they don't, in the time of failing currencies, they don't accidentally adopt Ethereum or something as a sound money. So it's preparation work so that people understand Bitcoin, know how to handle Bitcoin, and are ready. Because it's going to be messy. And we've seen this in recent history. India had a demonetization event in 2016 where they just pulled some notes out of circulation. And that was a big mess. And people died because hospitals would not accept the bills.
That's
and
crazy.
people were lining up at the banks and dying of exposure to heat. These things are not orderly. So I think, given that I'm so bullish, I think it's going to go very rapidly. We should be out there engaging and educating and trying to onboard people ahead of time, getting parallel systems in place where you have your fiat currency and you have Bitcoin, because that's the softest way, being able to move in. And back to your other question, why, at which point are we not early? When you cannot buy Bitcoin with fiat. That is late.
Interesting. Are central bank digital currencies still a threat?
I don't think they were ever really a threat because people don't want to use them. Every country that's rolled out a CBDC has sort of failed. Even in China, which you would think, yeah, they could pull it off because you can't use VPNs, there's great firewall and whatnot, but no one's using, barely anyone is using the CBDC. And then Nigeria had the e-Naira.
It was a total failure.
Total failure.
Yeah.
And they had to actually clamp down and limit ATM withdrawals to force people to use what they initially marketed as a convenience tool and, you know, to help you, to keep you safe. But if it's so good and so safe, why do you need to beat people over the head to use it?
Yeah.
There should be no need for coercion, but you do, because people may not understand Bitcoin, but they're not stupid. They're not going to use something where they can't get out. They're not going to check into their Roach Motel, right? Well, some do, but those are, we call them shitcoiners. But generally people know this is inferior monetary technology. They may not be able to quantify it and describe it, but they know inside.
Yeah. And what's really interesting what you said about the coercive aspect, right? Like CBDCs, fiat, they do require a form of coercion for people to use. I think the reason Bitcoin's going to win ultimately is it's incentives. It just comes down to incentives. Bitcoin incentivizes people for them to use it. There is no coercion in the equation. And to me, when I really learned that lesson, Samson, was when the China mining ban happened.
Yeah.
And the hash rate dropped 50%. Within 9 months, the hash rate recovered, decentralizing the process, went all over the world, Texas, Kazakhstan, and there was no Bitcoin CEO essentially whipping people to plug in those miners. It was just the Bitcoin network incentivizing people, entrepreneurs, miners, to plug those machines back in.
Yeah.
So it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, so fun times.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a bummer because it cut 2021 short. Like I really believe it. I know there's all these other theories, but you look at the hash rate and you look at the price drop, it's like, it's obvious that that's what it was.
Well, FTX cut the last one short too.
Yeah.
That's why I think we should be at 200 right now.
Yeah.
Everything under 200 is, you know,
It's bearish.
It's a joke.
So what are the things that worry you about Bitcoin the most?
I think Bitcoin is pretty solid right now. I don't really have too many worries. If I had to pick one, it would be sometime in the future, we might have something like a block size war or a civil war. And it might be from the traditional finance system, like the legacy finance system. Because if you look at the BlackRock ETF filing, they actually say in there, we get to choose which chain is Bitcoin if there is a split, which is incorrect. And if they amend that, I'll feel better. But until they do, I think that's a risk hanging over our heads. There's a chance that even if that doesn't happen, that Bitcoin can split into two. You have institutional Bitcoin and free Bitcoin. Institutional Bitcoin is just locked up in ETFs, in custodians, and it's not allowed to leave. And we see little snips and glimpses in the future of that, right? In the UK, you can only transfer from one exchange to another exchange, right? Little bits of, Orwellian garbage here and there. But that could really happen. You just have free Bitcoin, which is transacted in Argentina, El Salvador, and everywhere else. And then everything else is locked up in a system and it can't escape.
What can we do as a community to avoid that scenario?
There may be no way to avoid it, but you can protect yourself by keeping your Bitcoin yourself. Anything that's in the system or connected to the system, you have to understand there is some risk to it there, and you may not be able to take it out of that system.
That leads me to my next question, which is the idea of self-custody. I think I've been doing this 9 years, and I have this very, ideological view on self-custody. It's like, not your keys, not your cheese. But in actuality, I'm the Uncle Jim of my family and my extended family. And even though I've showed them 1,000 times how to do it, for whatever reason, writing down 12 to 24 words is like rocket science. So, and then in my experience, to use your analogy of earlier on in regards to people walking across the street, you know, the idea of not having a 1-800 number to call is radical. It's uncomfortable. And now that leads me to like my conclusion that I've come to with self-custody is, have we underestimated human nature as Bitcoiners?
I don't think so. We're just going back to the way it was. When everyone was using gold, who's the 1-800 number? There's no 1-800 number. We've just been coddled and, you know, domesticated into the fiat system that we think it's normal to be able to have someone help you, you know. The reality is you have to take care of your money yourself. Someone else can't take care of it for you. Or you think they can, but they're going to steal it slowly, if not immediately. So you have to take your assets into your own hands. Your destiny is your own. And I think we've done that in the past with gold. We can do it again. We can rediscover.
Yeah,
health.
it's just going to take a lot of work. I think it's going to be a generational thing. A lot of education required.
I don't think so. I think you get very fast education. Like everyone burned in Celsius and FTX. Do you think those guys learned?
Oh, they learned very quickly.
Yeah.
I remember earlier on this year, my sister lost her seed phrase, and I think she definitely learned how to take self-custody in that situation. So we were at your red carpet event yesterday for the HBO documentary Money Electric. How did that feel, man?
The red carpet event.
The red carpet event, you being in a feature film, the documentary as a whole.
It was fun, I would say. I think Peter had fun too.
Is he Satoshi?
No, he's not. The red carpet event was fun. We thought, you know, we're close with the HBO guys, and we said, you know, you didn't have a live showing or screening anywhere. Do you want us to help you do one in El Salvador, where a lot of the film was filmed actually in El Salvador? So we thought it was very poetic that we bring it here. We have a theater, we've got a red carpet, and we have, you know, Adam, Peter, myself, and a lot of other people, a lot of Bitcoiners go and see the movie together. It's like this thing you can't really do that often in your life, but go watch the movie with your friends that are in the movie.
When you got into the industry and, you know, when you first bought Bitcoin, could you ever have imagined what is happening today?
No.
No.
No. I think it's everything's happened faster and in a much more spectacular way than I imagined. That's why I'm really bullish, because I'm kind of bullish and then my expectations are beat and I try to reset them and then they are beat yet again. But everything's happening so much faster. Like the China ban was a nation state attack. Then you have El Salvador and nation state adoption. The timeline is definitely way faster, right? It's 16 years, and being in it, you kind of lose your perspective. But if you step back a bit and you try to look at it from afar, it's like, that's the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
The rapid pace at which we have grown as a community, as an asset class, and as a technology for money. It's just unbelievable.
Absolutely. It's been a hell of a roller coaster ride. I don't think I would want to work anywhere else. I'm sure you feel exactly the same way. Final question. What excites you the most about Bitcoin for the next 5 to 10 years?
Watching hyper-Bitcoinization unfold. I think it's 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. I don't think fiat can hold out that long. So I mentioned all the tailwinds that we have. This is happening at the same time the fiat system is facing headwinds, right? $36 trillion in debt in the US. Every other country is massively in debt with a really crazy debt to GDP ratio. The fiat currencies are failing. Canadian dollar, I don't know if you're watching it, but it's trading like a shitcoin. As with a lot of other fiat currencies, the yen is dying, right? Last year, there were so many Bank of Japan interventions to push it from 160 down to 150-ish. And it's back now. how much more firepower do they have? And at what point does that stop working completely? In the UK, last year, the pound almost reached parity with the dollar, which is crazy. The government bonds were in crisis. The Bank of England had to intervene. And maybe people are not paying attention now because there's so much other stuff going on. But the government bonds in the UK, the gilts, they are again in crisis. So if you look at everything, the entire macroeconomic landscape, you can see that 1 million is actually really conservative for this year.
Yeah.
A 10x is just pretty conservative.
That's a perfect way to end it. Samson, it's been an honor. We're here at the Jan 3 headquarters in El Salvador, filming in front of a real volcano that ain't a green screen. Samson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. That was dope. Volcano energy, bro. El Salvador, freedom country. It was a lot of fun.